We're rolling.
We are. Welcome, everyone, to this discussion. My name is Joe Kishore. I'm the National Secretary of the Socialist Equality Party in the United States. I'm here today with Jerry White, who's the SEP's presidential candidate, along with Niles Nemeth, his running mate, in the November elections. We're here to have a discussion on the election campaign, the political situation in the United States, the world situation, to talk about some of the most important issues in this campaign. This is a bit of an experiment. This is the first time we're doing a Facebook Live discussion. We hope this will be one of many, involving Jerry, involving Niles, involving other people active in the campaign. We welcome questions from those listening. You can leave comments on the video stream at facebook.com/SEPUS. I'll be following it here, and feel free to leave your questions for Jerry or myself, and we'll try to address them in the course of this discussion. We only have a limited amount of time, and of course there's a lot to talk about. We may not be able to get to all of your questions, but we'll follow up in future interviews and discussions. So again, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank Jerry for participating today. Perhaps we could begin the discussion, Jerry, with just perhaps a review of how you see the current state of the U.S. election campaign.
Yeah, sure. And I'd also like to thank and welcome all our viewers this afternoon. Well, it is shaping up to be an extraordinary election campaign, filled with international shocks, like the most recent vote on Brexit in England, which is already having international reverberations. But it's been an extraordinary election in the sense that the deep felt opposition over social inequality, the deep disaffection with the whole political system began to find expression in these elections, above all in the mass vote for Sanders, who presented himself as a democratic socialist. He won the support of broad sections of the working class, and especially among young people. But the whole character of the two-party capitalist system has produced a result that, despite the efforts of the population to express themselves, you now have a so-called choice between two of the most hated political figures in the United States, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And both of them are committed to continue the ruthless attack on living standards, austerity measures, and the promotion of military violence around the world. Mm-hmm. So again, it's an extraordinary situation in which the complete dead end of the capitalist two-party system has been demonstrated.
It certainly points to the fraud of American democracy, that this is the outcome of this whole campaign, which, as you said, has been characterized by such enormous disaffection. Perhaps we might talk a bit more about the significance of the Sanders campaign. I mean, he got somewhat 13 million votes in the course of the primaries, the Democratic Party primaries, rallies involving tens of thousands of youth. Some of the figures were quite 60, 70, 80% of the vote among younger people. Also beat Clinton significantly among poor income workers, or in the working class as a whole. Perhaps we could talk a bit more about the significance, or you could say a bit more about the significance of the Sanders campaign.
Well, first of all, so many predictions was that Hillary Clinton would just essentially be coronated, and she was the official representative who was going to go in fairly quickly, sew up the nomination. But she is so identified with the political establishment, with the status quo. She's identified with endless wars in Libya, Iraq, and so on, that the campaign of Bernie Sanders, who presented himself as an outsider, an opponent of the billionaire class.
So he was a socialist.
He presented himself as a socialist. That even he was very surprised by the immense support. And that indicated not so much his own intentions, but the deep-seated discontent over social inequality in the United States, over the fact that millions of people feel that the government is completely oblivious to their most essential concerns, over the stagnation of wages, the enormous eruption of social inequality, where 28 billionaires now control the same amount of wealth as the bottom half of the U.S. population. And so there was an immense turnout, and this is highly significant in America especially, where the question of socialism has been essentially prescribed from any dialogue. Anti-communism has been, as we said, the secular state religion in America.
And denied in the media, nowhere spoken about in the media. It's sort of
Right.
completely excluded from official political discussion,
Right.
socialism.
And in fact,
generations.
and in fact, what now, because of the conditions, particularly the younger generation is confronting, where the so-called American dream is unattainable, where young people are working, they're coming out of school with tons of college debt, they're finding low-paying jobs, the threat of war. So under those conditions, more and more young people, in fact, I think some polls show the majority of young people identify themselves as socialists, not as capitalists.
More young people identify as socialists than capitalists, which
Right.
is quite extraordinary if you think about it. But there's obviously a great deal of opposition. You pointed to the conditions facing young people, particularly, of course, after the crisis of 2008, which has had such a extraordinary impact. I mean, Obama, of course, is going around. He hardly gives a speech in which he doesn't proclaim that the situation is wonderful. Things are pretty darn great, I think is what he said. But of course, the reality for millions of Americans is very different, and particularly for young people, for the working class as a whole, which gets to the issue of the role of Sanders. I mean, obviously there's the objective significance of the support, but there's also the role that he's played politically. And of course, we've been writing about this from the beginning and talking to workers and young people throughout the country as we've been campaigning. I'm sure you have experiences you could share about that. But perhaps you could say something about the role of the Sanders campaign in these elections, the political role.
Right. Well, the World Socialist website and the Socialist Equality Party said from the very beginning, when he announced his campaign in midsummer of 2015, that Sanders was not a socialist, that in fact he had long allied himself with the Democratic Party. He promoted Obama, and especially on the questions of war, he identified, while he criticized Clinton over the Iraq War, he completely identified with Obama's interventions and drone assassinations. And above all, he presented in a completely fraudulent manner that the answer to the conditions of the working class, of unemployment, of stagnating wages, was economic nationalism. That the problem in cities like Flint or Detroit, he came and toured these areas. He said in Flint, very famously, the problem with the poisoned water in Flint and the social inequality, he didn't say it was capitalism, he said it was unfair trade deals. And he echoed and supported the trade union apparatus, which for years has sought to tell workers that the answer to unemployment is joining with, quote, our American capitalists to make them more competitive. He opposed any fight to unify workers around the world. So the main purpose of the Sanders campaign, which we indicated from the beginning, was to try to corral this growing political radicalization, this move to the left, this anti-capitalist sentiment among workers and young people, and contain it within the Democratic Party.
In the end, that was really what he meant by the so-called
Political
revolution. When he was candid about what it really meant, he would say that, well, the revolution is to get people out to vote for the Democratic Party. I'd like to continue with this. I just want to remind our readers, our listeners today, that you can comment on the Facebook feed at facebook.com/SEPUS, facebook.com/SEPUS. Underneath the feed, if you have any questions for Jerry, you can write them there, and I'll follow them here on the feed. I'd like to, perhaps we could discuss a bit more the role of the Democratic Party, but you referred to economic nationalism, which I think is certainly an important, critical political question. It comes up now in relationship to the Brexit vote, the really extraordinary vote in the UK for exiting the European Union. And the similar issues are raised there. There was, of course, a campaign that was backed by sections of the so-called left, but in fact was led by extremely right-wing nationalist forces, the UK Independence Party, to leave the European Union, which, of course, that was the way the vote came out. Perhaps you could speak about this. I know Sanders has issued a statement on the Brexit vote, and obviously there's immense political questions which we can't talk about at great length today, involving the Brexit vote itself and the political situation in Britain. But certainly this issue of economic nationalism arises in considering the significance of the vote there.
Sure. Well, I mean, in response to the global economic crisis that is leading to austerity and mass layoffs around the world, in every single country, the sections of the political establishment, it's the same thing here with the Trump campaign, are seeking to divert the anger over austerity, the anger over mass layoffs, with the promotion of anti-immigrant chauvinism, xenophobia, nativism. In England, the proponents of the Leave camp wanted to return to so-called Little England, or a return, as Trump would say, make America great again. The idea that there's a nationalist road, that if we bar Mexicans and Muslims or we bar Polish construction workers from England, that this is going to solve the problems of masses of working people. In fact, this is a thoroughly right-wing program. It's always been used to divide the working class, to scapegoat immigrants for the conditions caused by capitalism. And Sanders' response to the Brexit vote was not to warn about the dangers of xenophobia and anti-immigrant chauvinism, but to say this is the natural response to globalization. And as he said in his statement, he says, you see investors going to China and shutting down factories in this country and laying off workers. Again, the cause of mass unemployment, whether it's in England or the United States, is not unfair trade, it's not globalization, it's capitalism. It's global capitalism.
Right.
And the promotion of nationalism is to blind workers to that and to line workers up behind their quote own capitalists, first in trade war and then ultimately in shooting war.
That's worth, of course, noting that one of the points that we've been stressing, or your campaign has been stressing throughout, is the support Sanders gives for American imperialism.
Absolutely.
And the fact that the issue of war has not been a question that he's been raising in the election campaign, and he's supported the entire policy of the Obama administration, supported drone bombings, supported the policy in Syria, war in Iraq, Afghanistan. Again and again, he backed American imperialism, which is really telling. And I mean, perhaps, as you could say, it's the most clear refutation of his claims to be a socialist.
I mean, you can't fight the quote billionaire class in the United States if you support the geopolitical and foreign policy of the billionaire class all over the world. I mean, what are these wars about? They're about subjugating the masses of people in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa, to the demands of the very same transnational corporations and banks that are waging war against the working class in the United States.
Right.
Now, at the same time, and clearly the European Union, or the global structure of world capitalism, has offered humanity not an answer to war, not an answer to inequality. I mean, the EU is a body that's dominated by the biggest banks. It's imposed austerity on the people of Greece. It's the NATO operations against Russia threaten humanity with nuclear war. But the answer to global capitalism isn't nationalism. It's the international unity of the working class and the abolishing of this completely outmoded nation-state system that makes any rational organization of world economy impossible.
We should point out to our listeners who perhaps aren't aware that our comrades in Britain and the Socialist Equality Party carried out a very principled and important campaign for an active boycott in the referendum. And I would encourage everyone who hasn't read that material to study it very carefully, and also what we've been writing and our comrades there have been writing after the vote. Because it has been an extraordinary political experience, and the And the campaign waged by our comrades, I think, has proven, and the International Committee has proven absolutely correct. Obviously, we could get into Brexit, and we could talk about this at great length, perhaps for a subsequent interview. But we should go back to the political situation in the United States and the election campaign. Of course, now Sanders has more or less ended his campaign, and he hasn't officially declared his support for, or he hasn't officially endorsed Clinton, but he said that he's going to vote for it. Yes. What the difference is perhaps it's perhaps splitting hairs, but he says he's going to vote for her, hasn't quite endorsed her. But obviously, this is what he's preparing his supporters for the eventual endorsement, and is seeking to direct now or channel sentiment and direct people's attention to the Democratic Party National Convention in next month in July. But perhaps we could speak a bit more about this.
Yeah, well, he, of course, several weeks ago, he made his announcement essentially that he was wrapping up his campaign, but he assured his supporters that he was going to continue his political revolution. But that turns out now to be, and he said it very clearly, that the content of this political revolution is this sort of generations-long effort to transform the Democratic Party into a party of the working people. And he urged young people to go out and run as Democrats, and he's focusing the attention of his supporters on the Democratic Convention, where there's supposedly going to be this great battle over changing the wording in their platforms, which will be completely meaningless. Totally meaningless. But here you can see that first of all, the Democratic Party has never been a party of the working people and never will be a party of the working people. Actually, its origins trace back to the party of the slavocracy in the South. There's an interesting new movie out called The Free State of Jones, which is about a rebellion of poor white farmers in the South allied with runaway slaves. And during Reconstruction, the slaves and the poor farmers are voting as Republicans, and behind the ballot boxes are the Democrats, who are refusing to allow them to vote because they represent the remnants of the slavocracy. So that's the origins of the Democratic Party. But really, since the Great Depression and in the 1930s and the great influence of socialism, even actually before that, the populist movement, every sign of insurgent opposition of the working class and other oppressed layers, the Democrats have always sought to tap into these insurgent movements, corral them behind their pro-capitalist and nationalist program.
And smother them.
I mean, essentially, Roosevelt understood that if he didn't make certain concessions in the New Deal, that he could have a October Revolution-style upheaval in America. They were very conscious of that. He quickly then corralled this movement behind American imperialist interests in World War II. But there have been many examples of so-called insurgent movements. I mean, in the mid and late 1980s, it was the Jesse Jackson campaign who claimed that, he could shift the Democratic Party to the right. The same thing happened with the Howard Dean campaign and the Dennis Kucinich campaign, and now you have Sanders. And in the end,
you could even say that Obama, in some ways, represented. I mean, he was the transformative candidate, although he was. It was very empty. I mean, he was nominated as the marketer of the year, I believe, by Time once, and of course, but he did market his campaign, and I think it's actually worth considering because if you think about the political situation here, the experience of Obama has obviously been very critical on the experience of a whole generation of young people who've been politicized since 2008, and he was a candidate of change, and Bush left office, the most hated president in American history, and Obama was a candidate of change, of hope. He was a bit younger. Of course, he was African American, which was presented in the media and among pseudo-left groups as indicating a complete transformation of American politics. But what of course has been the experience? It's quite interesting because Sanders, his aim has been to bolster the Democratic Party, but they're very conscious because the support for the Democratic Party has been collapsing. Obama, in fact, was the first president re-elected with fewer votes than in his first election. In 2014, the midterm elections, turnout was really disastrous for the Democratic Party. And then you have Sanders come in and say, well, we need to get young people back activated, and we have to get people involved in the process again and supporting the Democratic Party. And they're obviously very concerned that there's going to be a movement outside the Democratic Party. But perhaps what's most extraordinary is what this has all produced. I mean, you have this, and all of this has now produced what? Hillary Clinton, the personification of the political status quo. You could hardly name. I mean, Trump has his line, crooked Hillary. But of course has his own politics and right-wing politics, but he's tapping into something. That there's a general sentiment that this is a completely corrupt and clearly status quo, and she's, the sort of nepotistic character of it, and this is what comes out of this election
and a politician who's thoroughly identified. I mean, her husband carried out welfare reform and law and order campaigns during his tenure, which produced increased poverty, increased the prison population. He also carried out the deregulation of the financial industry, the rebuttal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which led to the 2008 crash. And she's identified with war. But you had a situation, we were in contact with many auto workers saying in the plants that there was a deep support for Sanders. I traveled to picket lines during the Verizon strike. There was widespread support for Sanders. And his essential purpose has been, again, to try to sort of revive the credibility of the Democratic Party and the whole political system under conditions in which it's so discredited.
It's a desperate and difficult
It
task.
is.
One of our listeners wrote, and Hillary is poised to shift the party even further to the right.
Oh, sure.
So just look at her logo, which I guess has an arrow pointing to the right. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it's certainly the case. I mean, this is going to be the most right-wing campaign in American history. War, the assault on the working class. I think one point, because we don't have a lot of time, I know we have to end this soon, but I think you referred to the film that's come out, the Free State of Jones, which by all accounts is quite interesting. As you say, it's about an episode of the Civil War in which there was an alliance between poor whites and slaves. Very interesting. I hadn't actually known much about this before, but I just wanted to refer in that context to this column by Charles Blow this morning in the New York Times, under the headline "White Savior, Rape, and Romance," and it's actually devoted to an attack on this film. And I have to say, I'm not surprised. It cuts across a certain narrative in American politics, which Clinton is now very much promoting, and really this is the Democratic Party, of identity politics, that the fundamental issues are race. And you can see very clearly once Sanders' campaign has been sort of packed in, they're shifting very much to the questions of race, of gender, of sexual identity, of identity politics. The attempt is to insist that class issues are secondary, have really no importance, and also to castigate white workers as racist. And this is going to be the framework, the sort of marrying of identity politics to a right-wing militarist agenda, and the identity politics, which is based on more privileged sections of the middle class. But this column is quite significant. He very explicitly attacks what he says is the white liberal insistence that race is merely a subordinate construction of class. I don't know if it's liberal. I'm not sure how. I mean, liberals have been. Of course, that's the Marxist conception that class is fundamental, and it's certainly the case that in the Sanders campaign, that found expression. That is to say, that in the support for the Sanders campaign, that the class issues were, even the fact that women, by large majorities, particularly young women, were voting for Sanders by as much as 70%. But now they're sort of shifting it, and really to emphasize continuously that the racial questions, the racial divide, to try to really block a development of a class consciousness.
And her campaign is going to be the nexus of the right-wing economic policies and the interests of Wall Street, the militarism of the military and intelligence apparatus, married to identity politics in order to conceal the class character of this. And the fact is that the conditions confronting millions and millions of workers, white, black, and immigrant, in the United States and throughout the world, is the product of the capitalist system, a system she defends. And the promotion of racial politics historically has always been to divide the working class and to claim that if you elevate into the corporate boardrooms more blacks and women and Hispanics, that this somehow is going to deal with the vast social problems in America. And it has done none of that.
Well, we've seen the experience of course, Obama, and,
exactly.
and the conditions of black workers have gotten far worse.
Sure, or you take a city like Baltimore, which is led by a black political
or here in Detroit,
establishment.
of course,
or
although
here in
you
Detroit.
have a white mayor now, but
Sure.
a long-time black establishment.
Yeah, and the conditions for black workers have never been worse. The police brutality has never been worse. So our campaign is very much aimed at opposing the promotion of such identity politics, and which is always to protect the privileged few. I mean, we've traveled the country, and Niles and myself, and we intend to do more.
By the way, I'm going to have to make this your final comment. We're running out of time, but I do want to go back to your campaign, so perhaps you could speak about the campaign, what we're doing in this, and some of your experiences.
Well, we've traveled throughout the Midwest. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Chicago and Rockford, Illinois, Davenport, Iowa. And these are areas devastated by deindustrialization, but areas of rich traditions of the class struggle. And we are seeking in our campaign to evoke and provide a political leadership to the growing opposition of the working class. Black, white, and immigrant workers on the Verizon picket lines didn't care what color you were, or the nurses who have struck in Minneapolis and Los Angeles and Boston, or the teachers who carried out sick-outs in Detroit against deplorable conditions. The working class is being driven into struggle, and it needs our party is aimed at providing a political leadership to these coming struggles, to unify these coming struggles, to emphasize and warn about the dangers of war and trying to corral workers behind nationalism and war, and unify the working class and build in our party a mass political party of the working class that aims to take political power in our own hands and fight for genuine socialism. I mean, we believe that the economic dictatorship of the banks and the corporate elite has to be destroyed, that genuine democratic control of society by the working class has got to be instituted, and the vast wealth that's created by billions of people on this planet should be utilized for human needs, not private profit. And that's what we're fighting for.
And there's certainly an audience for this all over the world. And you see a growing resurgence of class struggle and a sentiment that something really fundamental is wrong and has to be changed. It's interesting. Sanders refers to political revolution, and actually now Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, has been talking about how she's now continuing Sanders' so-called revolution. And she was talking about this on an interview with CNN or something, and she said, I'm continuing the revolution of Sanders, and she was asked, well, what were a program? And her response was a call for quantitative easing to give money to the banks to pay off student loans. This was her great so-called revolutionary agenda. And it's, in fact, as the Green Party, this is perhaps a subject for another discussion on the nature of the Green Party, but it's a bourgeois party supporting capitalism. But it is interesting that this, they're starting to use the term revolution in a sense because it's in the air, and they're trying to sort of tap into a sentiment. Yes. I mean, we've had the experience, we've often noted, even before the election, of workers just saying, well, what we need is a revolution, or we're referring to the French Revolution, or the American Revolution, the Civil War, and you sort of get a sense that there's a hunger, there's something fundamental has to change, and I think certainly we're entering a very explosive period, whatever happens in these elections, I would perhaps conclude by urging everyone who's supporting us and watching us to join the Socialist Equality Party, support our campaign.
Donate to the SEP campaign.
Donate. It's really critical. We need resources. You can do this all at SEP2016.com. We want you to become involved. We'll be traveling throughout the country. You've only begun travels throughout November. We'll be having meetings. We want to set up election committees. Distribute material, really get the word out about this campaign and build the Socialist Equality Party. Mm-hmm. So we really want everyone to become involved and take up this fight.
Yes.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening in today. This is, as I said, the first of many. We have to have a further discussion sometime later in the week or after. And thank you again, Jerry, for participating.
Thank you, Joe.